We're good to start. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mariam Al-Qubaisi, and I'm the Head of Sustainability and Business Excellence at Etihad Aviation Group. And today we're going to walk you through the future of net zero aviation. And basically, we're going to talk you through or take you through our COP27 Net-Zero flight. But before that, I want to very quickly talk about Etihad. Etihad is the national carrier of the United Arab Emirates. And if you take a very quick tour around the pavilion, I think you can for sure know that the UAE and tell how far the UAE is invested in supporting sustainability. And in that vein, Etihad is fully committed to supporting sustainability as well. Three pillars we focus on: decarbonization, biodiversity protection, and waste management. But most importantly, decarbonization and the focus on sustainable aviation fuels and operational efficiencies. So today we're going to talk about a paradigm shift that Etihad went through over the past few years. We're sick and tired of hearing about challenges and why we can't get things done. And the shift was we focused on how can we get things done. We started a series of collaborations, and we realized that we can only do this with collaborations, the likes of the Greenliner program and Sustainable 50 with industry partners. And it's only through these collaborations where we invested our fleet as a test bed, basically, for sustainability. We had a very successful flight, we're very happy that it's featured in the UAE pavilion last year, where we managed to reduce 72% of emissions compared to a similar flight, similar route a year ago. The advantage here is that we did highlight challenges when it comes to integrating SAF. So three things we actually, or essentially, helped us make that significant reduction: 39% blend of sustainable aviation fuel, operational efficiencies involving contrail management, and lastly, route optimization. But when it comes to sustainable aviation fuel, the supply of the fuel is limited, the price is prohibitive, and guidelines are limiting as well. So we can't go beyond the 50% blend. So we asked ourselves, how can we, integrate SAF as business as usual? And the book and claim story, or the book and claim narrative came. It was something still being studied and reviewed. The World Economic Council, the Clean Skies for Tomorrow coalition, released a paper last month supporting the guidelines of the book and claim. So we reached out to our network. We wanted to demo book and claim. We wanted to try it with RSB, the Roundtable for Sustainable Biomaterials. Back and forth, and then I went into early labor, and I had my baby, so there goes my maternity leave. And somewhere a week out of hospital, I get a LinkedIn message from the SVP of Sustainability and ESG from World Energy. Hi, Mariam, we're interested in what Etihad is doing. Would you guys be interested in supporting a net zero flight for COP27? Music to my ears. I respond copying our sustainability champion from Ops, Jörg Opperman. 3 months and a half in, I'm standing before you today to walk you through the successful flight. If anything, I want you to take this with an open mind. This is an attempt at making net zero a feasible and basically a route today. We talk of net zero being 25 years down the road, 25 plus years down the road. I think it is possible today. Keep that in mind. How can we do things? And rather than focus on the challenges, why can't we? I'll hand over to my colleague, Jörg Opperman, VP of Operations and Sustainability Lead, to walk you through the results of the flight. Shortly after, our partners from World Energy are going to talk about book and claim and how we managed to, how is this flight essentially net zero. And then finally, we'll go through artificial intelligence and forecasting tools utilized to help us avoid contrails. And then finally, we'll allow some room for Q&A if you have any questions. Over to you, Herr Opperman. Thank you.
Miriam, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to tack on what Miriam said. So we had last year, we organized a flight where we wanted to see what we had done previously in pockets in our organization. And we orchestrated a flight from London to Abu Dhabi, which reduced the emissions by 70% compared to a 2019 operations. That was quite remarkable. And to be honest, when we started that journey, we were not sure where we would reach. And it was quite surprising what the numbers then told us afterwards. With World Energy approaching us, we took the next step. We were thinking, okay, how do we make it net zero by still making it a profitable flight? Making it viable that we can take this as a blueprint to scale it up, to actually reach our net zero goal when we have to have all our daily flights and all our monthly flights operating according to this blueprint. So obviously, first net zero means we as Etihad internally have to do everything we can to reduce all the emissions. So our flight ops team worked tirelessly with all our partners, specifically the air navigational service providers, agreed on direct routings. They agreed with the airports on closest runway, best aircraft parking positions. We agreed with our ground handlers to use all electrical equipment and ground power units. Everything which is in the rule book and which you can see in white papers written, we tried to establish it. And we actually realized that most of it is part already of business as usual. It is only prohibited in certain airports where the facilities or activities are not possible. By doing all this, we were able, on this flight from Washington to Abu Dhabi, to reduce the fuel burn by approximately 2.3%. Doesn't sound a lot, but in fuel efficiencies, you are talking about 0.5% a year, maybe 1% a year is already great if you can achieve this. So 2.5% is quite remarkable. And that is only thanks to the collaboration of all the partners who are involved, specifically the ANSPs along the route. And you can imagine for a flight from Washington to Abu Dhabi, there are many partners involved. The second thing then, decarbonizations. Obviously, the flight had still 216 tons, roughly, of CO2 emissions due to the fuel burn. Unfortunately, gravity is not stopping our flights. We need to overcome it with energy. So 216 tons. What can we do around these 216 tons? There comes World Energy into the play. We were looking at how can we offset these 216 tons with the equivalent of sustainable aviation fuel, and how would we do this? Our first approach was, okay, how do we get the fuel to the airport? How do we refuel? What do we do? And we realized if we would do this, we would create another 20 tons of CO2 emissions, and we would waste approximately $50,000 just for additional logistic costs. It didn't make sense. We tried our best. We then discussed to scale back. It was still too expensive. So we came to the conclusion that book and claim at this point in time, where sustainable aviation fuel is in limited supply at airports and infrastructures are not ready, this is the only way if you want to create a net zero flight. You need to use a book and claim mechanism, and my colleagues from World Energy will explain a little bit more how this works and how we have approached it. Next step in the journey was non-CO2 effects in aviation. It's not much talked about yet. It comes to the surface. We have started approximately a year ago to collaborate with Satavia. And in this collaboration, we took a very simple stance. We know there's debate about the science. I'm not a scientist. I'm not in the business to prove whether the science is correct or not. But what I know is, even the scientists who are not very convinced about the modeling say it has at least a factor 1.3 on top of the carbon emissions due to fuel burn. And some scientists say it's even a factor of 3. So from an airline point of view, the factor, the lowest factor, 1.3, means 30% of the emission. I had to run all over the place, talk to hundreds of people to save 2.5% of emissions for operational efficiencies. So 30% seems to be a very clear target. You do something about it. So we took the stand, we take the science as granted, let the scientists prove at the end whether it's right or wrong, and we focus as an airline what we do best on the logistics. How would we make it happen? If the forecast is correct, how do we adjust our flight plans? What does it mean? What do we have to do? And that is a learning curve we took over the last year in a proof of concept with Satavia, and we have applied it also here. You can see on the chart, the savings in CO2 tons is 94 tons. It's approximately 40% of the fuel burn tons. And the reality is, it was projected to be 268 tons. And the reason why we couldn't materialize it is we couldn't get the flight level in a certain segment of the flight due to air navigational service restrictions. The plan was to actually save 268 tons. Having done all this, we felt like we have done everything possible what you can do today to create a net zero flight. The last bit was it needs to be profitable. So airline business is not a high margin business. Sustainable aviation fuel costs a lot of money, so you need help. What we realized by working with World Energy is that specifically the incentive programs in the US and in the state of California are supporting us greatly to bring the cost to a level which starts to be acceptable. And then we reached out to our corporate partners. We realized that most of the shipping companies are interested in net zero solutions, and they are willing to support you and contribute to it. They are not just willing to pay the whole bill, but you can create models to achieve this. We have done the same with our Etihad guest loyalty program and got funds out of it. And our marketing team became very creative earlier this year. They have created NFTs of our signature liveries and auctioned them. And you would be surprised how much money people are paying for an NFT if you tell them all this money is used to buy sustainable aviation fuel, which has told us as a story, as Etihad, we need to build this model out, and we are able to scale net zero flights up. It is possible. Is it possible for 99% of our business? No, not today, but maybe in a couple of years. And that's where we want to go to. So that is my story around net zero flight COP27, and I hope we will get much closer to net zero week. Which year? I do not know yet. But I want to hand over now to Adam and to Scott to tell us a little bit more around the book and claim piece, because I believe truly net zero is only possible when you can use a book and claim process. Thank you.
Thank you, Jörg, and thank you, Miriam. I really appreciate this. My name is Scott Lewis, and I am the president of World Energy. We supply zero. And we've been involved in, World Energy has been around since 1998, but since 2018, we have become critically involved in the sustainable aviation fuel business. The plant that we have in Paramount, California, is the first dedicated sustainable aviation production facility in the world. Has been operating since 2016. When we bought it, it had a very low output of percentage output of sustainable aviation fuel, producing about 7% of our total, the balance being on-road fuels. And what we have, as we became more and more familiar with the need to reduce carbon in aviation, we decided to pivot. What the vision of our company was to focus on difficult to abate sectors. The business model and the financial model for on-road is very well established, and we thought that there was an awful lot of supply coming on board, and we very much pivoted what our goal is to embrace the technology that is now becoming available through our technology partners, Honeywell UOP, to be able to get a significantly higher cut of SAF out of our total production. And so we announced in 2018 that we were going to be taking the facility that we had purchased in Paramount from about 2,500 barrels of production per day of total production with about a 10% cut of SAF up to 25,000 barrels a day. And over the past 3 years, while we've been getting our permitting in California, which has been a really exciting expedition to go under, it's taken us 3.5 years to get our permitting. We have full funding, and meanwhile, the technology has evolved that Honeywell is now able to provide us with the ability to get up to an 80% cut of SAF. And all of a sudden, the big effect that this has on what we produce is that rather than being a sideline with a small part of a byproduct that was sustainable aviation fuel, we are now going to be scaling up to making it the main part of our business. And so when we scale up to 25,000 barrels of total production, that means we're going to have 20,000 barrels of sustainable aviation fuel rolling out of this plant every single day. And so that's about 250 million gallons a year. And so with that, it came about, how are we going to get a bigger impact with every gallon that we produce? So we consistently work to deliver lower and lower carbon emissions with every single gallon or unit of fuel that we produce. So we are now in excess of 80% reduction, and our goal is to get it to be greater than 100% reduction. And by that, we are getting more and more efficient feedstocks. We are moving into the green hydrogen sector, and we are going to be building a 3 gigawatt wind to hydrogen to ammonia back to hydrogen plant on the west coast of Newfoundland that will be coming online in the end of 2024. And the idea is to continually use every means available to be able to drive down the carbon intensity of the fuel that is going to be consumed. We believe that sustainable aviation fuel shouldn't be talked about in gallons. It should be talked about in tons of carbon that is reduced with every unit. And so that's what we're trying to do, is get to greater and greater efficiencies. So what we did is when we acquired this facility, it was a 100-year-old petroleum refinery in just in south central Los Angeles. And it's a 67-acre parcel. What we're doing is investing, as you can see, it's 100 years old. What we are doing is investing $2.5 billion in this site to both increase its efficiency, upgrade the technology that is available, while consistently working to reduce that carbon intensity and find the most efficient way to be able to get sustainable aviation fuel to integrate with the existing infrastructure of airports in the way that the airlines, such as Etihad, actually consume the product. And what that means, the inevitable result of that is to go to book and claim. When we made this is what the plant is going to look like when it's completed in 2025. Well, one slide back. And when we purchased the site, we also purchased about 47 miles of pipeline within the LA basin. Much of it was not operable. We are investing considerable amounts of energy and money into recertifying the pipeline. So by this time next year, we will actually be able to take our product and deliver it by pipeline rather than by truck into LAX, where what that product is going to do is displace petroleum jet fuel. And so whether that product is actually used by aircraft that are going to be fueling out of the general fuel tanks at LAX, or whether it's going to happen out of Dulles in Washington, D.C., effectively the same as we are displacing petroleum and therefore the emissions that are going out of petroleum. So the product that we used in this instance is greater than 80% GHG reduction when compared to petroleum, and it's been delivered in the most efficient way that we can possibly do it. When we start scaling up to having 20,000 barrels a day, and with the standard blends where we have to blend at least 50% with petroleum, it means that we're taking 500 million gallons worth of trucks that would have to transport that over to LAX and be able to deliver that by pipeline. So at every single part of the chain, we're looking to find greater efficiencies, lower what that carbon reduction is going to be, and to deliver it in a way that is going to utilize the existing infrastructure and existing technologies. Another part of what we're looking to do is not simply wait. We're a technology neutral company. We are looking to take a technology that exists now, because we believe that rather than waiting for the perfect solution that will come with greater efficiencies down the road, we need to embrace what's here now, because the fight for carbon mitigation in aviation needs to happen today. We will evolve with our next plant and the next plant after that, with whatever the greatest new technology that is proven is going to offer us. But in the meantime, we're taking the newest and latest and greatest that we have today. Technology marches on. What we need to do is to get these solutions in place today and look to deliver it in the most efficient way. I'm now going to hand it over to Adam to talk about the methodology and the manner with which we treat book and claim and why we truly believe that it is the future of the most efficient way to displace carbon in the aviation sector.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, returning to the historical milestone that this is, really, if you look at the progression of sustainable aviation, we have monumental efforts and successes with the creation of CORSIA. Aviation was the first sector to create a management of greenhouse gases and agree across nations and across businesses that we were going to reduce carbon before any other sector. And we see book and claim in the same way in our partnership with Etihad as a groundbreaking historical moment that's going to unlock carbon reduction. I think at COP, it's very easy for us to get discouraged. There are reports, people may have seen Economist magazine saying, goodbye 1.5 degrees. We may not be able to shut down coal plants in aviation. We can only affect and influence our own backyard and our own activities. And what's exciting about book and claim is it allows us to get to net zero today. And Etihad taking that leap of faith, having a partner with an airline who is willing to move with the speed and attention to affect real change is very exciting to us, and we highly value being able to work with a very progressive airline who can lead on this. This is a key ingredient to scale. It needs to start with the realization of a virtual transaction can work, and how do we assure people that it works? We have to use a credible system. So for our approach, we built off of learnings and insights in the foundation from the World Economic Forum's Clean Skies for Tomorrow. They advanced a concept a year ago called the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Certificate. That's the unit of trade where we're making this transaction possible, where we as the fuel producer can provide the virtual attributes as a product that's separate from our liquid fuel. And this is key because in aviation, as people know, we've got a blend wall, as Scott mentioned. We can only go to 50%. So even if our fuel is 100% emissions reduction, which we're moving towards, not there yet, we can only reduce a flight by 50% in terms of its emissions through conventional delivery. But net zero allows us to deliver more and to get to that 100%. So people in the industry say, okay, book and claim, kind of a cool, novel thing right now, but we won't need it very long. Actually, we will need it because we can only get right now to the 50% blend, and there will always be parties that want to get 100% and get to net zero after this historic moment. They see that it's possible, and there'll be a demand to get to net zero now based on this action. So how does it work? We deliver through conventional supply chains and mass balance, chain of custody, the fuel to LAX. It's only about 20 kilometers from our Paramount plant, so it's efficient. Right now, the deliveries are by truck. They will be by pipeline soon, as Scott had mentioned. This is the lowest carbon way that we can deliver the fuels, and we then can sell and lock the environmental attributes once that fuel's been blended to customers anywhere in the world, effectively decoupling the aviation activities from the decarbonization action. And this is at the core of how this works. So building off of the World Economic Forum's SAF certificate, we sell this SAF certificate, we create it, it's issued into a registry. And we're working with RSB, as Mariam had mentioned, and RSB has a standard, just like they have a standard for sustainability. We will create the proof of sustainability as part of the conventional chain of custody, and it'll be conveyed through the SAF certificate. And the SAF certificate gets created at the point of blending. So when we mix this sustainable aviation fuel with the conventional jet fuel, and then it becomes a drop in fuel, that is when we create these SAF certificates, and then they get conveyed. The ownership transfer then goes to Etihad in this case. Etihad then can put onto the SAF certificates their Scope 3, the end customers, and they can share the claim, both together realizing the vision of net zero. And that is then retired on a registry. Temporarily it will be RSB, but in the longer term it will move towards a digital registry that will complement registries from ICAO and Corsia and can demonstrate actions above and beyond those that are required for compliance. So this is what's exciting. It allows leaders like Etihad to demonstrate that it's possible to go even further. So the important part of this all is that it's verified by third parties. So RSB, as a standard holder, then creates the requirements that can be audited by a third-party organization like SCS, Scientific Certification Systems, who will look at the records of this transaction and assure that there has been no double counting, that the ownership has been conveyed to Etihad, and that only the customers and Etihad themselves can claim the credits from this. So this is a sound process. We're building up a virtual transaction that we believe will have tremendous impact and benefit for aviation, but be the realization of the vision. Just like aviation showed other sectors that it's possible to create and realize your own vision of reducing carbon. Similarly, we're creating a booking claim system here in aviation that's going to be a model for other harder to abate industries like shipping, steel, aluminum, and others. So it's fantastic to be here at a historical moment. Thank you all for being part of this. And we want to make sure that people realize what a tremendous milestone this is that Etihad was able to achieve.
Adam, just before we move on, I think that we also want to emphasize that we've been working to put this in place over the last 3 months. And today we wanted to also announce that we've signed a memorandum of understanding to announce a long-term partnership with Etihad in order to put long-term offtakes into place. They're going to show the mutual commitment that is going to grow. The relationship will grow from where our limited production is now as we increase. We're increasing both from next year. We'll be producing at 3 times what we're producing today, more in 2024, and then eventually in 2025 when we go up to the full 250 million gallons of production. The idea is to have a dedicated supply that we're going to be able to feed in with Etihad as we grow within this relationship. So it involves this sort of long-term commitment, and this is not just a one-off, but in fact the way that we see the future evolving for a partnership between our two companies.
So, yeah, thank you very much, Scott and Adam. To be honest, for an airline person, that was awfully complicated. But it took me 3 months to understand it. To actually then do it was maybe a week's work. But I think equally interesting and exciting is what we do with Satavia in the non-CO2 space. And I would like to invite Adam to tell us a little bit more about how we approach this and how we work together.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Adam Durant, Chief Executive and founder of Satavia. So we're a software and data analytics company based in Cambridge, UK. And we work with Etihad and other airlines to help reduce their non-CO2 climate impact through smarter flight planning. So contrails, beautiful looking clouds. These are contrails viewed from the International Space Station. Actually, this was taken in 2012. Very obvious linear features formed by aircraft. Well, actually, when an aircraft flies through the atmosphere that's already quite moist and ready to make clouds, burning kerosene also emits water in addition to NOx and soot. So the additional water can actually drive cloud formation. It happens instantaneously in the plumes that come out of the back of the engines. And the water goes directly to an ice crystal. So these are clouds of very small ice crystals. They're very effective at capturing some of the heat that's trying to escape to space. They also reflect sunlight, but on average, across all flights, they cause a surface warming effect. So an extensive review was published in 2021, which ended up in the latest IPCC report. And it looked at aviation's total climate impact. So that's considering the CO2 element plus the non-CO2 elements of contrails, NOx, and soot. And as Jörg mentioned, there is a wide range of estimate as to what that actual forcing is from the non-CO2. But at the lower end, it's as big a problem as CO2, at the upper end, it's possibly twice as big as the CO2 climate impact. So there's no debate. Contrails cause, on average, across all flights, a surface warming effect. And there is a fairly simple solution to this. But critically, about 80 or 90% of the contrails climate impact is coming from just about 5% of all flights, all scheduled flights in an airline schedule. So this means if we can solve the problem across those 5% of flights, we can actually reduce maybe up to 60% of aviation's climate impact, which is actually 2% of all anthropogenic impact. So that's 2% of climate change caused by humans solved by a data and analytics solution. So what we do is we do best-in-class weather forecasting. So we've spent years perfecting our ability to forecast and analyze water and clouds in the atmosphere. So we build on best available science coming out of places like NOAA, NCAR, DLR, working with organizations like the Whittle Lab, Professor Rob Miller here, collaborate with any leading organization, really. We want to bring the best science to actually solve the problem. So we do weather modeling, and then we analyze individual flight plans to do simple changes to flight levels. So you can literally change the height that the aircraft's flying at to avoid flying in moist air. You could also do slight reroutings, but you've got to also be very careful not to create a fuel penalty through extra flying done to avoid these layers. So there's an optimization that's required. And so we can set limits on what's acceptable in terms of any additional fuel burn. But we find when we do this, we can save, on average, up to 150 tons of CO2 equivalent forcing per flight that we modify. So that's the first step. We've spent the last year working on a method that alongside dispatchers in Etihad, where we analyze the entire schedule on a given day. We go through every single flight, we get the last 20 flights, we analyze the climate impact of all of those flights and come up with a list of, a short list of flights on the day that are going to have long-lived, persistent warming contrails. The airline just carries on about their business, plans all of their flights as they normally would, and then we request a small number, maybe 2 or 5 in 100 flights, we request the flight plans. And we've built software to automatically analyze those flight plans and deliver briefing packs to a dispatcher in the airline. So the dispatcher then can make changes to an existing flight plan, doesn't need software integration, and this only takes 5 to 15 minutes per flight, depending on what software they're running. And really where we're trying to help the adoption of this is through an incentive that we would like to bring to the industry. So we're working closely with organizations like Gold Standard and Vera to create a carbon credits methodology around this. So we're very focused on developing an incentive for the operators. We think that that's the best way to go forwards with this. We do the optimizations at the flight planning stage. You minimize fuel burns. The pilot's already briefed on what they need to do before they even leave. And we can make decisions about go, no go on a particular flight, depending on how heavy the aircraft is, if there's air traffic restrictions on the day. After the flight's taken place, we go in and do the accounting. We verify that the decision that we made to change a flight actually had the benefit, created the benefit that we wanted to see. We turn that into a carbon dioxide equivalent amount by comparing against the original flight plan, and then we're going to make carbon credits for the operators. So the first flight, the first commercial flight, so there's a series of firsts that Etihad has done. The first commercial flight that did SAF and contrail prevention was done about a year ago. So this was a London to Abu Dhabi flight. On that flight, we saved 64 tons of CO2 equivalent forcing by making a simple change to the flight level that the aircraft was flying at. And then we did another first in October. So this was flying out to Tokyo. So we also powered the aircraft with sustainable aviation fuel and did contrail prevention. And finally, we opened up the transatlantic routes. So we did a flight on Sunday in collaboration with World Energy, where we did maneuvers to avoid 94 tons. And as Jörg mentioned, we actually had planned to save over 260 tons, but we had various restrictions that prevented us from doing that. So just to end with an announcement. So we're absolutely delighted that we're going to be signing a letter of intent to partner with Etihad, a long-term partnership. So it's got two elements to it. It's to do the contrail prevention as part of regular flight operations, but also we are signing or intending to sign a long-term offsets offtake agreement. So this is the first of its kind, and it's a benchmark for the industry, and it'll set a model for other operators to follow. So we're absolutely delighted to be working with Etihad, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this very optimistic approach to net zero. I guess the take-home message is it's possible to reach net zero today. I will open the platform for questions from the audience, if we have any. Please, sir, go ahead.
Sorry, Edmund Bauer from Arabian Gulf Business Insight. You mentioned that you're signing an MOU today. Do you have any information about that, about the details?
We'll be releasing that more over time. It really is, it's about establishing long-term offtake agreements. And so we'll have more at the time when those get signed, which will be over the next couple of months. We will release more details to give more exactitude.
So basically today we're announcing that we're going to now start using these technologies as business as usual in our operations. Other questions? Haldane?
Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation from everybody. It's great to see. Just a question for Satavia. Haldane Dodd with the Air Transport Action Group, for those who don't know me. On identifying where contrails are going to be a potential problem in terms of atmospheric conditions, what more do we need to do in terms of monitoring those types of atmospheric conditions to get a better picture of where the problem could be?
It's a very good question. So fundamentally, we need to be able to forecast water vapor far enough into the future that it covers all flights in an airline's flight schedule. So we run a 36-hour forecast, and we have spent an awful lot of time validating our model forecast for water vapor against available observational measurements of water vapor, and there are sparse data sets available today. So we rely predominantly on measurements that are coming from a project called IARGOS. So this has been running for nearly 2 decades. It was originally called Mosaic. It's a fleet of A340 aircraft that are carrying various instruments that measure greenhouse gases, water vapor, and cloud properties. So we've done an extensive piece of model data comparison against that, but we need more data, more in situ data like that. We can also compare against satellites, the satellite Earth observation measurements. Again, certain satellites are geostationary, so they're further away from the Earth, but they don't have the resolution that we might need to see individual contrails. So actually measuring contrails directly is very difficult. So we have to actually then rely on validating inputs into models that predict when a contrail forms and how long it persists. But yeah, I would say the more measurements that we can generate, the better validated the models will become. So if we invest in observational measurement campaigns or systematic measurements, then we'll be able to improve the models even more.
Professor Miller.
Rob Miller, Whittle Lab, Cambridge. Great ambition, incredibly impressive what you guys are doing, really pushing the boundaries. I was interested in, the CO2 effects you're avoiding are brilliant, but we'll see the benefits of those over 100 years or more, depends how we bookkeep them. Contrails, if you switch them off tomorrow, you'd bookkeep them all tomorrow. And so as we're moving towards 2030, the possibility of switching off contrails has an even bigger effect than Satavia is saying in terms of integrated to 2030 or 2035. So this does seem, though challenging, a very good way of having a lot of impact quickly and making aviation really lead the field of decarbonisation faster than other fields. So more of a comment than a question, I'm sorry, but great
Thank
talk.
you.
Great.
Oh, absolutely. I'll just sort of follow up with some thoughts. The level of investment that would be required to completely solve the problem for aviation is orders of magnitude less than the amount of investment we're talking about to build refining capability for SAF and distribution and such. So actually it's a real opportunity for the industry to take fast, effective action and could make a massive difference by 2030.
I'd like to take a moment just to go back to this gentleman's question about the MOU, and I just want to sort of say where this came out of. We've been working very diligently on putting this all together for this event, and what we found is a real meeting of the minds as to where both of our companies wanted to go in the fight towards mitigating emissions in aviation. And being of like minds, this is about how do we uncover all the strategic ways that we can work together for a long time in the future, take the time to peel away all the layers to find out how we can best interact. You know, for our part and for Etihad's part, I think I can say that we're trying to establish a model here for sustainable aviation fuel that is going to encourage future and attract future investment into more facilities to produce more and greater volumes of sustainable aviation fuel. And so all of that is contained in what we're looking to take the time to rationally sit down, discuss, embrace. I think the very first thing that we're going to be accomplished is a long-term offtake, but there's so many other aspects of the way that even Satavia and World Energy can work together, because we see that at every single level we're trying to find the most efficient way to leverage existing infrastructures and existing and new technologies to be able to get to a greater effect. And so that's why it's a little hard to describe in just one soundbite, but those are the objectives of what we've written down in that MOU.
Any more questions?
Miriam, if you allow me, to the point made about the contrails and what we have here as partnership, I want to also point out our programs with Boeing under our Greenliner program and Sustainable 50 with Airbus are very important, because what we realize when we do flights like this, and you can sense that we do this basically on a weekly basis, we find also a lot of need around aircraft performance, technical aspect. So it is not just the three companies coming together, it is everything, every step forward we take in one corner has an impact on another part of the aviation industry which has to follow. And this kind of collaboration, exchanging information is the most important element we have realized on our journey, and we believe that's the same for all the other airlines.
Thank you very much. Michael Campbell, if you can raise your hand, head of comms. If you have any media questions, please reach out to Michael. Thank you very much. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, it is how can we do it, not what is stopping us. And this is testament to our approach. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.